Hey, I'm James from Smoking At Barbecue, and today I'm answering the question, direct or indirect, which provides the best flavor? A year or so ago, I did direct beef ribs on the rotisserie, and I was blown away at the flavor. And so there's some pros and cons. Starting with indirect, the pros here is we don't burn the bottom. But in an energy efficient grill like my Kamado Joe's, we can struggle to get good smoke flavor. And so we can throw a whole bunch of extra stuff in there to try and ramp up the amount of charcoal and wood that we're burning in order to get some of that flavor and not deal with any of the consequences that come from having our fire down below. If we're cooking directly over the coals, I've done picanha, turkeys, to even those live fire beef ribs. And every time that I've done them, I just remark at the refreshing, great flavor. Whether it's fat dripping into the coals or it's just exposure to the coals themselves, there seems to be something magical. And so depending on the grill you have, whether it's green egg, Kamado Joe, Primo, or anything like that, you often get a deflector included. And if it's a series 3, you get a deflector and a slow roller included. I want to know, is it actually worth going through the hassle of adding in all these deflectors, or are we just missing the keep it simple silly principle and cook directly over the coals and get an equally good, if not maybe even better result? So I've got a couple racks of ribs, two practically near identical Big Joe's Series 1 and a Series 3, and doing blind taste tests, I've been stumped before in terms of being able to tell the difference between the two of them. So I think this is going to create a great option for comparing direct versus indirect. Let's start some fires and we'll get to work on our ribs. This is my Big Joe Series 3, which is a couple inches taller than my Series 1. But to try and even that out as the difference between the two, I'm going to use the grit extender, which will put our ribs right up in the dome. And on my Series 1 and Series 3, they end up at the same spot in the upper part of the dome, but that's going to give me a little bit more clearance. This will also allow me to show the full Monty double indirect version on Series 1 in terms of how I can use the slow roller, deflector plates, drip pan, you name it. So let's clean out our charcoal, get anything that's on the edge. And if you missed that comment in another video, I've been testing all summer. I put the stock ash collector back in my Series 1, and I've been testing this Kick Ash can from Kick Ash Basket, which allows me to remove all of our ash in one step like this. So let me dump that. Back in we go. Line that up with the door. Charcoal basket. I've picked 4 even as possible pieces of smoking wood, so I'm going to place 1 on the bottom. We'll cover that with charcoal, and then right after we start our fire, I'll add the other chunk on top. They're oak for all of our pieces. Cover this up with charcoal, our grill blaze or grill gun, and fire that up. Add our smoking wood. While we've got no stored energy in our ceramic, everything is cold to the touch. That's going to allow this piece of wood to start burning clean. There'll be a little bit of it left by the time that we get our ribs on, so we'll get some benefit of pure wood burning smoke early on in our cook. And the Kamado Joe raised grid accessory. Let that start to preheat. Let's go work on our Series 1. Clean out our ash. We'll bury a piece of smoking wood underneath. Fire this one up. Next, we're going to install our deflector stones on the tabs of the charcoal basket. This is for the full Monty setup, double indirect on a Series 1, like I'm using our Series 2 Kamado Joe. You don't have to do that, but I get asked that all the time. And from doing side-by-side tests, this does give the best result without fail. So that's what I want to put against direct, so we have our best fighting chance. Next, water pan. I'm using the Smokeware original medium size, so I think this is 14 inches. Base of our slow roller, top of our slow roller. In the Series 1, Series 2 grills like I have, there's not enough height to drop another drip pan here, so I'm just going to get a little bit of tin foil. Cooking grids, let that come up to temp. Okay, let's get our ribs ready while our grills are coming up to temperature. I'll add a chapter down below. I don't want to make you watch the exact same thing if you've already seen it, but this is my new and improved rub based off of the favorite things that everyone liked in the blind taste test from Goldies, Franklin's, as well as Black's. But if you've already seen it, by all means, please use the chapters and skip it. I shared this in my bacon lard injected ribs, where we rendered down some bacon fat, injected it into the ribs, and they were pretty spectacular, as was this rub, but I've been using it on everything since. Let's get these out of the package, pat them dry, get some paper towel ready. So these look not too bad, although this one still has the membrane on, and for some reason Costco's removed that one, so I'm just going to even them out and trim off the last little bit that's scraggly and just going to burn. We're not going to get anything out of that from a yield perspective anyways, along with anything that's sort of loose and floppy here on the bottom. Grab our membrane. I'm going to skip things like binder since I really want to focus in on any differences between the two methods from direct to indirect. I don't want any extra flavors getting in the way that make it a little bit harder to appreciate any of those nuanced details. So we'll just add our rub. These look good. We'll wait for our pit to get up to temperature and we can throw them on. Smoke's gone clear. We've got some heat in our dome, so I know we are now heat soaked. So let's add our ribs. Likewise, our direct heat, also running right around 270 degrees Fahrenheit. Add our direct ribs. You can hear some sizzle already. Start with our Big Joe 3. Before I open it, we're running right along at 300 degrees. I just want to get a temperature on the ceramics, just so we can compare the two setups to see what sort of energy is in the dome. So on this side, we're 185 degrees. A little bit warmer for some reason on the right side, 190 degrees. And then down low, so we're about 154. So most of that energy, as you'd expect, rising heat rises, getting trapped in our dome, and that's where we're getting that radiant heat effect. I'm doing this, by the way, so we can compare to the double indirect, because my suspicion here is that it's going to be the inverse of that, where we're trapping a lot of energy, making that fire work harder. But that's why I want to record that before we open it and take a look. Oh my goodness, those look good. Make sure I got the camera so you can see. Oh, you need to be a little bit closer. See what's going on here. So these have taken on some really nice color. Bone pullback is looking good. How's the bottom? That's not too bad. I'll have to move the camera a little bit so you can see. Speaking of move the camera, I don't know if you can see it down here on the bottom. That piece of smoking wood that we added on top never fully combusted, as we were just basically simmering along with a few glowing coals. We lost the open burn, and that piece of wood is still very much looking like a piece of wood. Let's get a temp on these while we're here. They feel good. I think we are almost done. Yeah, those are done. I'm going to pull these off as soon as our simple syrup glazes. So I've got that in a bottle. Just again, 1 part water, 1 part sugar, gentle heat until the sugar disappears and goes clear. Let that tack for a few minutes and we'll get those off. Okay, same idea on our Big Joe Series 1, which is running double indirect. I'll have to put the temperature up. I feel like that is actually pretty much close to the same temperature. 196, we did left and right. So left, 197.8, and right, 210. So just like on my Series 3, interestingly, the right side is a little bit hotter. And down low, as we guessed, a little bit hotter on the bottom. So again, more energy trapped below, making that fire work a little bit harder. So our ceramics are up to nearly 238 degrees down low. What's interesting, you'll see here in a second as I was spraying, completely different looking color on these. These are the same rubs, same ribs, but instead of that mahogany color, we are getting more of a sort of a Texas smoked look. Not black, but darker color. So either that's because we burnt more of the wood underneath, so there's maybe a bit more smoke on these. Dirtier smoke could be an option. I hope not. We're burning nice and clean out the top, but we will see. And for temperature, these are just about a degree or two behind. So I'll remove the other ones first and then come get these. Well, our ribs have rested, and interestingly, they both finished plus or minus about 5 minutes on the exact same amount of time at the same temperature. So we were about a 3-hour cook between 270 and 300 degrees Fahrenheit on our double indirect as well as our direct ribs. And as you can see, plain as day, there is a very different looking color. So let's see how this plays out in taste. Grab a knife, slice them up. Well, no judgment yet, but they say you eat with your eyes, and as you can tell behind me, I'm kind of a sucker for red. These look really good. Let's see how the bottom looks. So, you know, a little bit on the bones, but actually on the bottom where our membrane used to be, not bad. Let's get a slice here. A little crunchy. Looks pretty good overall. Nice, tender, juicy. You're seeing just, I don't want to squeeze that out because I'm planning to eat this one. Not as much smoke ring as I was expecting, but again, maybe with that piece of wood that you could see visibly not yet consumed, that might be part of the difference. Let's get a couple samples out of our double indirect ribs and compare. Flip these over. They look very similar to me on the bottom. Nothing really to tell them apart. A little bit less crunchy. And I was expecting maybe more of a smoke ring difference, but you can see a little bit. Like if I go side by side here, there's a slight difference, but actually not as much as what the outside color would suggest. They both have a smoke ring. It's light pink on each one, and I didn't show you here, but don't want to squeeze that out, but you can just see there's pockets of juice ready to explode. So, moment of truth. Let's dive in for our taste test. Well, they look good. So in terms of how to pick what to start, you can always taste more smoke, but you have a hard time tasting less smoke. And just looking at the two of these, my suspicion on color is that there's going to be more smoke. I don't know if it's good or bad yet, based on how they look. So I'm going to start with our direct grilled ribs just because they look the best. And I suspect it'll be easier to tell the difference if I did it the other way around. So that's the reason behind, the method behind the madness, if you will. Cheers. Nice tenderness. You can bite through. Don't know if you can see that. Shape of my, line it up like the squishing ant bread. Do a rib head, James. The rub, as always, is fantastic. Again, there's a chapter down below. You'll definitely want to check that out. Nothing crunchy or dry yet. This is really good. Spoke too soon. There it is. So we removed the membrane. So this is not membrane that I'm biting into, but the bottom quarter inch, not quite, is pretty charred. Like I'm not even able to bite through that. It's very dry. I don't really love that. So until we got to the bottom, that was a pretty good rib. Let's move on to our double indirect ribs. Cheers. Again, right on the money. Bite through, juicy. Spot right here as I got down near the bone on our indirect ribs obviously is no problem. We can clean these bones until they're polished if we would like to. I think I would like to. Wow, so the double indirect ribs taste much better than they look. So if we were doing points on judging all day long, I like the look of the direct ribs. In terms of texture and juiciness, the top of the rib was pretty similar, but there was more juice in our indirect ribs versus our direct ribs. Ran into a real problem with dryness as we got down below the bone, but on the upper part of the rib it was pretty good. But about the halfway point, it started going from a really juicy, flavorful experience to getting a little bit dry to eventually, you know, working our way right into the scorched earth territory. So how do we pick a winner then? Well, the advantages were stacked in the indirect's favor. We had heat deflector plates, a water pan, a slow roller, and the option to be able to burn more smoke. And so all of those things, whether it's the water pan, which we didn't have in there, the indirect, the slow roller, there's so many variables. It's hard to pinpoint to say which one specifically led to an advantage. And even though I loved those direct rotisserie beef ribs, I have to say today that the flavor is stand out better on our indirect ribs. So I love the simplicity of the direct ribs. If anything, my mind is going, maybe the rotisserie would have been a better option because we wouldn't have just one side of our ribs exposed to the heat the entire time, and we might even get more fat dripping. That's what I did for those beef ribs, so perhaps that's got to be something to it. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see either a rotisserie rib or even we try a brisket direct in the Kamado. I'm not sure how to quite get it to hold together the entire cook, particularly as it gets tender, but based on these results, it's good enough. I think it's worth a try with a couple modifications to solve for the bottom texture that we are getting. But for now, if you're looking for the absolute best result and you've got the patience to go through a couple layers of deflectors to get the best possible rib, hands down, these are them. That's nearly it for today. If you have any questions, you want to interact in a real-time manner, be sure to check out my members live section where I go live once a month and we can ask questions real-time versus these pre-recorded videos. That's it for today though. I'm James from Smoky Dad Barbecue signing off. Remember, don't be afraid to fire it up. All right, there is a lot going on in front here, but don't worry, we're not going to use everything. So if you saw my Texas Rub Showdown, I put 3 of the most popular Texas barbecue joints head to head, starting with Black's, Goldie's, as well as Franklin's. And in the taste test, even though Black's won, there was a little bit of each of these rubs that we really liked. I liked some of the more salt-forward flavors that you get on Black's, along with what you can see in there, some of the red chili flakes. With the Goldies, a little bit stronger, you know, on the pepper, as well as kind of a bit of a Lowry's flavor coming in. And the Franklin's is a 2-part with salt and pepper on its own, as well as this barbecue rub, which if you were to recreate this, it has a little bit more of a citric acid flavor, which is what I'm gonna get inside the Lowry's. I'll put the make your own Lowry's rub down below, but it has some very similar ingredients, and in terms of the taste test, many people actually thought this was my homemade rub. So that's what we're gonna make up today. I'll put those aside. and go for my version, but if you're using any of those three, you're off to a great start. So since we're only doing about 4 racks, I think I'm gonna start with a couple capfuls of fresh cracked pepper. That should be enough to get us through these 4 racks. So let's try our hand here with 2 capfuls of fresh cracked black pepper. I'm using a 5 peppercorn melody. You can see a little bit of white, red, black pepper. I'm not sure what the other 2 are. It's from Costco, so that's just giving me a couple different spices. You don't need to follow along with a pepper can. I just happen to make my own rubs all the time, and you'd be blown away the difference that fresh spices make in your rubs. And since I get about 10 times more pepper per crack, it doesn't take that long. I got a little bit more to go, but we've almost got a full cap right now. So I'll take you fast forward while I get 2 full caps of fresh cracked black pepper. There's number 2. And just looking at that quantity, I know I said 2, but I think I'm gonna go for 3. It'll also make our ratios easier with the salt, since I'm gonna do 2/3 Diamond Crystal Kosher salt and 1/3 Lowry's. That'll just be a cap of each to get 50-50 salt and pepper. So I'll take you fast forward while I do 1 last cap full of pepper. All right, that looks good. So we now have our pepper. So we're gonna start with 50-50 salt and pepper, as I mentioned. So let's get out some Diamond Crystal Kosher salt. And I'm gonna do 2 capfuls of this. Add that in. And to get to our 50-50 ratio, I will do 1 capful of Lowry's. And again, if you don't have Lowry's in your area, I'll put how to make your own down in the description. Okay, so we're now a 50-50 salt and pepper rub ratio. I'm gonna add just a couple extra ingredients. I guess I'll save my pepper cannon cap here for measurement, but I'm gonna go sort of 2/3 garlic and the rest onion powder. Give us a little bit of a savory flavor profile. Will go great with ribs. Next, I'm gonna add just a little bit of color. So I'm gonna go for about a 1/2 cap of smoked paprika, and then about a 1/4 cup of cayenne. Might as well add the rest of that since we're almost out. A dash of mustard powder. We're gonna be using mustard as our binder, so I don't need to add that much, just enough to cover the top of our paprika and cayenne. And last little bit of space here, I'll sneak in a couple red pepper flakes that'll mix throughout our rub once we give this a good shake. You want to leave about 1 inch to 1.5 inches at least at the top. Make sure we have enough space for getting everything to mix together. There's all our layers. Let's mix them up. Okay, that's looking good. I might just add in a few more red pepper flakes. Looks like I can get away with a little bit more for that texture, but otherwise I'm really happy with the consistency of our rub. So like I mentioned at the beginning, this is a mixture of all 3. You can see a couple again of those red pepper flakes along with a lot more salt in the blacks rub. So we've got for a bit of a blend, taking the pepper flakes from blacks. We've got a little bit more of that color from the Franklins and getting some of that citric acid or acidity in our rub flavor that everyone really liked in this one. And then I've gone for a coarser, I don't have much left of the Goldies, but a coarser grain pepper than something that you might get just out of the bag. So we get a little bit more of that texture, and people really like the texture of the Goldies rub. So now we've got our rub ready. Let's get our ribs out of the pack and start to trim them up and get our rub on.